Hello and welcome back to my channel. So this is going to be part 5 of my library shelf tour. Before I start, I just want to apologize for the angle. I know it's like super compressed. This part of my shelf is over in the corner of my room, and then I have a bed on this other side here. So I don't have very much room to fit my camera stand that I have my phone on, and me get back here and you be able to see the full shelf in the frame. So I'm just trying to make it work as best as possible. So today is part 5, and we are working on this shelf right here today. So first book on the shelf, I guess we'll start from left to right. Starting from left to right, we have 2 editions of Billy Collins' collections, Poetry 180. I absolutely love, this is the other one. I absolutely love these collections. So these are not necessarily the poems of Billy Collins. These are 180 poems picked and curated by Billy Collins and then put into these anthologies, essentially is what they are. So they are absolutely wonderful. They are mainly collections of modern, current day contemporary poets, although there are some romantics, there are some modernists, but typically they are contemporary poets, most of whom are still writing today, which is really cool. It exposed me to a ton of new poetry and a ton of new poets that I wouldn't have found if I hadn't read these, so highly recommend these for any poetry fans. The next book on the shelf is a novel that I have not read called My Name is Asher Lev. I picked this up at a local bookstore about a year ago, and it's just been sitting on my shelf, and I honestly forgot that I owned it until I was looking at the shelf getting ready for this video. It is a Jewish coming-of-age novel. I am very interested in it. It definitely is still one that I want to read. I haven't come around to it yet. I definitely am hoping to be able to read it this year. Next on the shelf is one of my favorite all-time classics, and that is Les Mis by Victor Hugo. This is a bit of a beat-up, older Penguin Classics edition, but I absolutely love this novel. I have read it almost 2 times all the way through, one time all the way through, and then another time where I kind of skimmed through and found my favorite parts and read those, but absolutely love this novel. Next is a really short little book. It's kind of a children's book, kind of a teen, young adult, not young adult now by today's standards, but when it came out in the 60s, young adult, and that is The Weston Game. This is a fantastic, just really short little murder mystery novel, really not too complex when it comes to the mystery, just a really fun, quick read. Next on my shelf is definitely a classic, and honestly, it is one that I also have not yet read, and I do feel very guilty about not having read it yet, and that is George Orwell's 1984. I saw this in a Barnes & Noble, I believe, about a year ago, and I just was drawn to the cover. I thought it was the best cover edition for this novel that I have yet seen, and so I just thought, you know what, I don't have this book on my shelves yet, and it's such an essential, important novel, especially now in the 21st century, and so I decided just to pick it up to have it on my shelf, and it will be there waiting for me when I am ready to dive into this. Next on the shelf is James Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. This is one that I am super interested in, super excited about, and super daunted by as well. I've read a ton about this novel. I have watched a ton of Booktube videos about this novel. I have just not yet mustered the courage to start it. I hope to soon. I know there is so much to unpack in this novel. It's short, but I know it's going to take me a while to read it. And so I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but I hope it can happen soon. Next, we have a collection of The Works of Charles Dickens right here. It is 4 volumes. The first volume is David Copperfield, then Great Expectations, then Oliver Twist, and A Tale of Two Cities. I'm just going to leave those on the shelf. I'll just show one because they're just blank hardcovers. So they are all identical. I picked these up at a little secondhand bookstore, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And then they have just been sitting here. I have already read some of these novels, not in these editions, in different editions, but I wanted to have a representation of them on my shelves. And when I saw this old sort of vintage Dickens collection for a fairly reasonable price, I just thought it would be a great addition to my shelves. Next on the shelf, we have Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe right here. And this is the Wordsworth Classics edition. I don't have many of the Wordsworth Classics editions, but it's a great little edition. It's very similar to the Penguin Classics edition, but this is absolutely fantastic. Next, we actually have another Dickens novel, and that is my other edition of A Tale of Two Cities. Just a little paperback edition here. Next, we have Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. I love this edition. The cover is so beautiful. I have not read this edition. The edition I have read is the Amazon Kindle edition. Next, we actually have another Dickens. I think I'll move this over so we can have the two Dickens together, and that is The Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens. I'm sorry about the bookstore stickers here. I have tried to remove these, and every time I have tried to remove them, I have pulled off a little bit of the front cover, and I didn't want to rip the cover, so I just left them on. This is another Wordsworth classic, so I said I didn't have many. I have this one, and I have Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe. Pickwick Papers, I have not read this in its entirety. I have read about 100 to 130 pages into it. It's another one that I hope to continue a little bit into the future. When I originally started, I just wasn't really in the mood for the tone that the story presented, and I moved on to other things. But I will certainly be coming back to this. All right, so we'll put that by the other Charles Dickens. Next on the shelf is a sci-fi novel, possibly fantasy. I'm still not great with the categorization of things that are not classics or literary fiction, and that is Philip Reeves' Mortal Engines. This is book 1 of the series. I believe there are, let me see, 6 total books in the series, I believe, and this is number 1. I read this last year. I enjoyed it. I have not read much science fiction at all. That is something I'm trying to work on this year by reading more. So when I did read this, I really was not a good judge of science fiction or fantasy. I enjoyed it when I first read it, and I would definitely consider reading the rest of the series for this one. But I don't have a ton to say about it because I'm still working on developing my taste in science fiction and fantasy and learning what's good and what's not good. Next on the shelf, we have a collection here of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. This is a one of the Barnes & Noble edition. I don't believe it's a Fall River edition, but I got it at Barnes & Noble. It was one for, I think it was $5, maybe $6. It was on sale, and it was just this giant complete edition of H.G. Wells' stories. And so I thought, I definitely need to have this on my shelf to represent, one of the greatest science fiction writers of all time. All right, next on the shelf, we have one of my favorite novels, and that is To Kill a Mockingbird. This is one of 2 editions. I have another edition on a separate shelf. This was the first edition that I had, and this is the original book, or the original edition that I read when I read this book. To Kill a Mockingbird is absolutely one of my favorite novels of all time, and I honestly don't see that changing anytime soon. Next, we have a really tiny, a little Shakespeare edition here of Romeo and Juliet. Just a really small single edition of the fantastic Shakespeare play. Next, I have The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. So I read this last year, and I had a very interesting experience reading it because while I did enjoy it, I felt that it was much too long for what it delivered, and that it could have, in my opinion, it could stand to be about 200 to 250 pages shorter. And then there was something about it that I just didn't really lock into from the beginning, and so it was more of a struggle than a joy to read. And I feel bad saying that because I know the immense amount of time and work that went into crafting this incredible novel that so many people have loved. I just haven't locked into it yet. It definitely is one that I would be open to coming back to in the future and giving a second read and a second try. It's one of those situations where I think it's the reader and not the book itself. I think that I just wasn't able to fully appreciate what this novel has to offer, and so I'll definitely be trying this one again in the future. Then last but not least on this shelf is one of my favorite contemporary fiction, more modern fiction reads, and that's A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Tools. So I read this in 2020. I think I read it almost exactly this time 2 years ago in 2020, and I absolutely loved it. I read it during COVID, during some of the lockdowns, and so I was able to connect on a very shallow level, at least, with our protagonist's plight. It's a novel about a Russian count who gets sentenced to house arrest in the Metropole Hotel in Moscow, and so the whole novel is basically about his life in solitude and isolation, and sort of the struggles and the joys that he finds along the way. I will definitely be doing a video dedicated solely to this book in the future, just because it is so fantastic and I absolutely love it. And that wraps up the library tour, part 5 of the library tour. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you have read any of the books that I showed and have any thoughts about them, please feel free to let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.